Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. If I could draw your attention to the stage as we get started, I would like to ask you to put your phone on silence. I know you probably will want to take pictures, but please put it on silent so you won't be disturbing the speaker. I'm Henry Giles, president of Spartanburg Community College, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here. Kevin was reminding me earlier, this is the 10th year that we have been doing Arboretum Adventures, and I see some faces in the crowd that I believe have been here 10 years. So thank y'all for staying with us, and thank you for your interest in our program. I know you're going to have a great evening. You've got a great speaker, and you have good fellowship. So I'm going to turn it over to Kevin and let him introduce our speaker for the night. Kevin.
Thank you, Mr. Giles. I wanted to give you a little quick rundown of some of the projects on campus that are underway or have been recently completed, and then we'll roll into what Mark's going to inspire us with. In less than a year, Jay Moore and Jason Bagwell, pretty much the two of them hand in hand with no help from me, managed to transform the back entrance of campus into our Sustainable Agriculture Center. This is what it looked like about a year ago. Jay came up with a master plan, and here we are today with a building, food-producing plots, and how many pounds of food did we distribute this growing season? I think Barbara knows the number. A little over 1,000 pounds of food in one growing season. So we're very proud of this new addition to our horticulture area. Classes were run in that building, and the classes this summer actually helped grow that first crop before the facility was even finished. So it was an amazing first summer for that program. Then one of our other new initiatives, this was our employee parking lot. And some of us were sad to see it go away, but in the grand scheme of things, this is going to be one of the most exciting additions to our campus for decades to come. That's now gone. And this was the plan that was conceived, a huge green space that we can have outdoor activities, and an excellent addition to the green areas of campus that we can use in our horticulture labs to teach plant materials. This was the demolition, day one, and it was amazing how quickly this went this summer. The walkway in place, and then with the sod going down, the finishing touch in July. So this was the project that came together nicely. The weather cooperated, and it was ready when students came back to campus. Our next project upcoming from Charlotte. This is the interchange just beyond Beverage Air, and we had landscaped this back in 2015. And then what happened last October? We lost 60 trees in the heart of campus, and we lost every one of those pine trees in that interchange. So our plan is to reforest, but to plant not just a pine forest that is traditionally done to cover up lots of space, but to plant a primitive forest of noble tree species. Ginkgo, dawn redwood, and magnolia are all groups of plants that we have fossil evidence of. They've been around for eons of time, and that's what will replace those pines as we go into this fall and winter. Another initiative on campus is our culinary arts area that's just to the other side of the whole building, and this is the conceptual design for that culinary arts garden. So there'll be outdoor dining, and there'll be a new landscaped area that we'll be proud of on campus. Probably by the end of the spring semester, this will be coming together. We've also renovated the C wing into a student activity center. You'll have to come look at the inside. It's incredible. State-of-the-art televisions. We've got a ping pong table. We've got a foosball table, pool table. Students are using this very heavily. It's been very well received, and we'll soon be doing a landscape renovation around this exterior as well. Now, walking by that, I was reminded that we've also recently completed this container garden in front of the B wing of the Powers building, and we were able to install an outdoor television. And we run 24/7 horticulture education on this outdoor television right out there in the Arboretum. And honestly, I was walking back to the office just before this event to go get my little memory stick that has this introduction on it, and I heard a familiar voice. I thought, I was just with our speaker, Mark Wethington, walking around campus, but there he was talking on our television just a little while ago. We'd actually filmed Tony Avent, who we often go to visit on fall trips, and here is Mark at the J.C. Ralston Arboretum introducing Tony Avent on our television as I walk by. So Mark is apparently here on campus more regularly than I thought, and we're glad to have him here live today as well as on television. So I'd like to really do an introduction for Mark and quickly turn this over to him. Mark's the director of the J.C. Ralston Arboretum, and for anybody that's visited there, anybody in the horticulture industry, that's almost like a little piece of heaven. For somebody that's been as a nurseryman years ago, as a landscape designer, a lot of the ideas that you see throughout the Southeast come out of the J.C. Ralston Arboretum. Mark was telling me today that he regularly entertains landscape architects to come and get ideas about plants. So Mark finished Virginia Tech in '95 and went on to Atlanta Botanic Garden to get his first 10 years of experience, and then went on to the Norfolk Botanic Garden. And Norfolk, if you've not been there, that is an incredibly diverse garden. The coastal Piedmont area of Virginia is very similar to here, incredible garden. But for Mark to step into the J.C. Ralston Arboretum and take over the mission of Dr. Ralston was an incredible thing that happened at the Arboretum. Mark's one of the greatest plantsmen I know. He's on the board of the Magnolia Society International with me. We have traded plants back and forth. He's one of the most passionate plantsmen that I've ever met, and it's really an honor to have him here to speak to us today. Thank you, Mark.
Well, I'm blushing after that introduction. I got to say, I am blown away with the campus here. I've only visited one other time, and I came in the back way and went right down to the greenhouses and did some of that plant swapping. I brought a whole bunch of different things, and I came away with about 50 pretty amazing magnolias, I think. It's incredible. But I hadn't been up on campus and seen what's going on here, and I wish I could get our campus grounds to work with our horticulture students and replicate some of what's going on here. They don't seem to have the same interest in working together and really utilizing horticulture for things like that bistro garden that's coming up, and with the culinary arts. I just think it's amazing what's happening here. And I know some of the former students who are out working in the industry with some different folks, and I know how highly this program is thought of with people who've worked with those students. So really, really pretty exciting to see it all happening here. I'm going to go back one. My wife just saw this picture recently, and she laughed. She's like, how old is that picture? That's not what you look like anymore. You have less hair, and what's there is a lot grayer than that. Much of it's come in the last 3 or 4 years since I've been director at the Arboretum. I was assistant director for many years, and I didn't realize how much easier it is to have one person beyond you who's really responsible for everything. So we are part of NC State University, so much like the Spartanburg Community College Arboretum, we are a university-related, a school-related arboretum. And really have been founded kind of with J.C. Ralston had a singular vision. For those who don't know J.C., he really is one of the most respected plantsmen, really was one of the most influential people in horticulture. Back in 2004, Horticulture Magazine commissioned a painting that they called the Heavenly Garden Party. It was the 25 most important, most influential gardeners who had passed away, not living folks. And you know, depending on your knowledge of horticultural folks, you may recognize some like Ernest Chinese Wilson, who was responsible for introducing so many plants from Asia. You had Gertrude Jekyll up here, Thomas Jefferson, most everybody knows him, Elizabeth Lawrence, those kind of folks. Right back here, he didn't get the front row with Gertrude Jekyll, but right here, he is in color, so I figure he's not one of these background guys, is J.C. Ralston. He was considered in that pantheon of the 25 most important gardeners, along with Thomas Jefferson and Asa Gray and Gertrude Jekyll and Elizabeth Lawrence and folks like that. And they did a great job of capturing his personality. I can't, really vouch for the rest of the people. I did meet Rosemary Veary before she passed away, but J.C. is the only other person in this that I had met. And they got him with his pruners. I don't know if you can see that in the back, but he's got a little pair of pruners right there. And J.C. was notorious, infamous, for liberating cuttings from places he went. For a while, he was not allowed in Kew Gardens because he had liberated a few too many cuttings, which is kind of ironic if you ever read any of the stuff about what Kew Gardens did with rubber trees and tea plants and things like that, smuggling these things out of, they just did thousands of them, not just a couple of cuttings. But he came by it honestly because he felt like there was no point in having a plant if you weren't sharing it. The Arboretum has always been open to sharing plants. In fact, there's some nurserymen who, duck and cover when they see us coming because they know we're going to be bringing a load of plants that we feel like they've got to try, they've got to think about. So our Arboretum has always been open to having people come and take cuttings, professionals come and take cuttings and get plants that way. If you want to know more about him, he was a fascinating person. There's a great biography of him. One of the things I learned in this biography is only tangentially horticulture related, although it is. J.C. was in the Army during the Vietnam War, working with the I don't know what they called it, the horticulture unit, developing and testing herbicides. So there is a famous one, Agent Orange, and that's because the barrels it were painted orange. There was also Agent Blue and Agent Green and Agent Pink and Agent Red. They just weren't very effective. So J.C. actually worked with Agent Blue, which was an aerosol herbicide to kill rice plants in paddies. It never went anywhere, and he only went to Vietnam for a couple of weeks to test it. But it's really a fascinating book. J.C. came to NC State. He had been a few other places, and he had kind of developed what he called the 40-90 rule. That anywhere you were in the country, there were about 40 plants that made up 90% of the landscape, 90% of the plants available to buy. So in Texas or Florida or Raleigh, North Carolina, they may be different 40 plants, but still there was no diversity. And he was hired by the university to help grow the North Carolina nursery industry. That was his mission. So he had an extension mission to help the nurserymen, and then he also taught classes. And, based on his 40-90 rule, he said, how are they going to have new nurseries come in? How are you going to have nurseries make more money? How is this industry going to grow if we're all growing the same 40 plants? It doesn't make sense. So he set out to, in his words, were to diversify the American landscape. And so to do that, he just started planting everything, seeing how they grew, and then the things that were good, distributing them to nurserymen all over the place. Conifers. We grow conifers all over the South now, but we didn't used to. You could grow loblolly pines and maybe some red cedars and things like that. J.C. said, okay, conifers don't grow in the South. I'm going to plant a whole bunch of them out and see what happens. And you know what happens? They grow pretty well for us, or they die. Some of them really don't like growing for us, but other ones grow really well. Some of these dwarf conifers that grow 1 to 2 inches a year, I love that. If you look up online, we have some of those plants that are out there for the silent auctions. There's some conifers. If you look online, there's at least 1 or 2 of them that'll say they'll grow 1 or 2 inches a year. Let me tell you, there's nothing in the southeastern U.S. that grows 1 to 2 inches a year. That does not happen. So some of these dwarf conifers get a little bit big because they're so happy. And, we've changed over time, gone from, really lining things out and not really thinking about display to really trying to make the Arboretum, make our evaluations a little bit more attractive, much like what's done out here on this campus. We always, every time we do something, we try and go to the next level. So our last house was falling down. And so we built another one, which has won several architectural awards and still fulfilling the same purpose. So we think we do a pretty good job at making the Arboretum a beautiful place. But it still is really all about the plants at the Arboretum. We grow somewhere in the neighborhood of 7,000 different plants out in the garden. Oh, I do want to point out, right here in bloom is one of my favorites of Kevin's magnolias at the Arboretum, and a real spot of note right there where several paths meet. It's a great plant. For those of you who can't get to the Arboretum, and I hope you do come up, we're free to come in. We're basically open for daylight hours. You can come in for free. But if you can't get up there, we do have a great website that has a lot of information. We always, what we have, we want to give away. We still have that same ethos of generosity that JC had. So plants, we give away information. You can go in there and search through our plant database and find information, which is useful if you know how to look for it. This is Calycanthus ralstonii Hartledge wine, plant that was introduced from the Arboretum. And we'll have some things in here, like if you look at the bottom, you'll see that this one plant, we received it in 2000 as a cutting, planted it in 2000. The last time we measured it was in 2012, and it was 13 feet tall. So you get a sense of growth rates for plants, things like that, using our website. You can also get a map where it is in the garden. Really soon, we're going to have an app where you can put in the name of a plant. If you're standing in the Arboretum, it'll give you directions to walk to the plant. It's very difficult. It's really easy to do that. We talked about that with some computer science folks. They're like, yeah, that's no problem. And then we said, we change things all the time. We're always changing paths and digging beds and making new beds. And they said, oh, that makes it a little more difficult, but they're working on it. We also have images. We have about 300,000 images on our website. So you can come in, you can find images for all kinds of plants, landscape situations, people. I'm sure if you went in there and searched Kevin Parrish, you'd find him in there because he's given talks for us, brought students down. And the images are all free to use for educational purposes. So, if you're a master gardener and you have a master gardener newsletter and you need an image, you're welcome to use our images. We also have a great bloom calendar, so you can kind of plan a trip to the Arboretum based on, or if you want to see something in flower, a particular plant, you can look on here and find when it should be in flower. And all of that, we didn't go out and record those. We have 300,000 images, so every image that's marked that it's at the J.C. Ralston Arboretum and in flower, we put it on there. So it's kind of great. We do a lot of education, try and get things out for some publications for professionals. I had a speaker talking to the students this morning, Andy Cabe from Riverbanks Zoo and Botanic Garden. He was one of the first visits I made with my staff after starting it at J.C. Ralston Arboretum. And he said, when are you going to update the propagation guide for woody plants, which hadn't been done since 1995 or 1996. So we've updated it. We're due for a new update next year. So 2019, we'll put out a new one of these, really geared towards professionals because it's not a lot of information in there. It's all abbreviations and things, but it's good information. And of course, we're also looking at homeowners. That's last year. I put out a book with Timber Press for gardening in the South because there wasn't really good information out there for Southern gardening. It was all information that people had copied from books that were written in England or New England or the West Coast. So all based on my personal experience. So now we are part of the university. And I don't know if you know this, but universities don't support a lot of things out there. We actually support 84% of our budget is self-generated. So there's my salary and somebody else's salary, our electricity, our water, our housekeeping. That's it that the university covers. So all the rest of our staff, all of our, any kind of travel, any kind of plant purchases, any kind of new initiatives, we take care of. Actually, the university takes 7% off of any donation we get. They take 7% for overhead. So we actually winds up being kind of a wash at the end of the day with what they take from us and what we get from them. But that's okay. It's a great place to work. Despite our truth in advertising, we do get great students. I know you've got fantastic students here. I talk to a lot of people, and they say, "Oh, these kids, they're always tweeting and twittering and always laughing. They say Facebooking." I'm like, they're not on Facebook. There isn't anybody under the age of probably 35 on Facebook. You got to have grandkids to post pictures of on Facebook. And they're right. They are always on their phone, but what I find is they're usually Googling a way to do something better, easier, more effective than the way I just told them to do it. So it's okay. They still get a lot of work done. And they are, I can't speak for all college students. I can speak for NC State horticulture students. I didn't go to NC State, so I'm not bragging on my alma mater or anything. They are fantastic. I have a couple of college-age kids. I'm a little iffy on them, but the horticulture students at State are amazing. And we do a lot of classes. We're part of the university, of course, so we are part of the Department of Horticultural Science. We're a living laboratory, not just horticulture, but ag engineering, chemistry, forestry does a lot of work with us, plant biology. You know why we have plant biology and not botany? Anybody want to guess why plant biology and not botany? Because nobody Googles botany. Because there are very, very few 18-year-olds who want to be botanists. But when they Google biology because they want to be a vet or a marine biologist, they get tricked into seeing plant biology, and it sticks with them. In a moment of weakness, the department head there told me that and swears it's true, that's why they changed from botany to plant biology. And the students are great workers. You give them clear direction, and they can do anything. I speak all over the place, and I was giving some talks in England, and the first one, I put this slide in. It's a good laugh line, kind of thing. That reads differently in England than it does here. And I was talking to a lot of very proper, very, very proper English women, and they did not laugh at all. It was all downhill after that. So our students, I like to put this in when I'm talking to especially folks who are looking at horticulture. This is really, this is across the U.S. In the next 25 years, about 85% of agriculture jobs are going to be in the plant sciences. But everybody is going into the animal sciences. But that's not where the growth is in the industry. It's in plant sciences, and there are not enough people for jobs out there in horticulture. It's a real problem, and I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing for that in a bit. Now I put this up before, but really I should take out the young, because at the Arboretum we have a tremendous number of volunteers, a little over 300 volunteers who put in last year over 12,400 hours of service to the Arboretum. So 6 full-time people. We could not do it without them. So, talking about the Arboretum, one of the things that we always get asked is, where do you get those plants? Where do you get such cool plants? Because we have some of the coolest plants. We always say it's always fun to have the first one, but we never want to have the only one. As soon as we get something cool in, we start propagating it and start giving it to other people, because we kill a lot of plants, a whole lot of plants. So we want to make sure we get it in the hands of somebody who's going to take care of it. I was just talking with a nurseryman who's here today who is going to get me back a plant that we managed to kill off that he's kept alive for 20 years. So we're excited about that. So just some numbers. I like numbers. So we have over 7,800 different taxa or types of plants. Not all of them are in the Arboretum. Some of them are in our nursery still. But like in a typical year, we plant about 1,000 plants. We bring in every year about 1,000 new plants. So we have to kill a lot of them. We've only got 10.5 acres. So a lot of what we do is go out plant collecting. That's something that a lot of gardens don't want to talk about so much anymore because there's this debate over, whether we can bring anything into the country, right? Plants, people, anything. Cars, whatever, you name it. So I think it's important that we go out and we collect plants. An example of that, where I try and hone it in on people who are gardeners who know plants. You're familiar with encore azaleas, right? The reblooming azaleas. So does anybody know where they get that reblooming characteristic? There's a species of azalea in Taiwan, Rhododendron oldhamii, and it flowers in the fall. When I go to Taiwan, it's flowering in October. So there was basically one clone of that plant in the U.S. What was it? Now I can't remember the name of it. One selection. That's what led to all those the encore azaleas. So the first time I was going to Taiwan back in 2008, one of our plant breeders at NC State said, "Hey, I want you to look for this Rhododendron oldhamii because I'd like to get some new genes in, some new genetics in, to see if we can do something different." Not much came of it, but that's what we're doing is we're looking for new genetics. So we've collected places like Mexico. Back in the day, JC went there and went to Korea. We were just looking at a plant from Korea that JC brought back out in the garden today. But Viburnum chindo is in the trade. And this Emerald Pagoda we were looking at, which is a phenomenal snowbell that we got from wild collecting. There's so much out there that's going to be gone pretty soon. There's whole mountains. There's a plant that was collected by somebody in Raleigh in Thailand. He went back to that place to collect it again, and the mountain is gone. It's been mined for gravel for building. If you go to China, they're just whole mountains gone as they're so. When we go and collect these plants, it's also to preserve some of this germplasm. We go to all kinds of places. Georgia, that is not the state south of you, that's the Republic of Georgia. Boxwoods and cherry laurels and all kinds of things. People don't know why they call them cherry laurels because they don't see them in fruit. This is why they call these cherry laurels, because they have big, beautiful fruit if you get the right ones. And we spend a lot of time in Asia. There's so many plants there. It's so similar in climate to us. And work with partners. We don't do this alone. When we go to China, China's very difficult to do alone. So we work with folks like Benji here, who's at the Chinese Academy of Sciences. He runs the herbarium there. Or sometimes we get to meet local folks. We will actually be sleeping in this little hut in just a couple of weeks. I'll be going next week to China, and I'll get to sleep in that little hut. What you can't see, because I always like to make it look really like we're roughing it, right beside here, there's a solar panel. You know what the solar panel's for? Charging your phone. They cook everything over a fire. Everybody has a phone. These guys take care of bees out in this remote valley, and they live out there for 6 months. And based on us meeting them this time, all they do is drink. Especially the guy with his arm around me. He smelled like a still. In other places like Taiwan, I'll just rent a car and we'll go off. We don't have anybody in country. And people say, is that hard? I'm like, no, it's easy. They've got, signs kind of in English. If you don't want to go south, you go north. Yeah, we see these signs, right? I didn't realize it meant that the entire hillside would be gone. I was there during a typhoon. You know what a typhoon is, right? It's just a hurricane in Asia. Had to sleep in the car because the road was washed out on both sides of the road. So we slept in our car that night. By 1 o'clock in the afternoon, they'd cleared the road out. you can't say they're not literal. Much cheaper to put up a sign than it is to put up a new bridge, or even any barricade at the end of the bridge. You could just, you're not paying attention, you drive right over there. You better read the signs. It's always interesting there. Whenever we travel, there's this great book, The Romance of Plant Hunting. This is the reality of plant hunting, is lots of time in hotel rooms cleaning seeds so you can bring them back in the U.S. That's what the bulk of it is. And the food's always interesting. I will tell you this: iguana does not taste like chicken. But I was raised. I've got Cajun family, so I've eaten alligator and snake and all kinds of things. It's okay. But you never know what you're going to get. And there's always, the local delicacy is always the most disgusting thing. I don't think I have a picture in there now. This place we're going back, where we've already been, the local delicacy is, it's basically a hellbender salamander. Have you ever seen one of these things? Think a Gila monster, but a salamander. So it's got the kind of slimy skin, and they're this big fat things. And in southern Gansu, that's a delicacy. And when you come in and you're from the West, they want to treat you right. So you get salamander for dinner. And, the worse the part of the salamander, the intestines and eyes and whatever, the more of a delicacy it is. So I can eat almost anything. I do, it gets worse in the U.S. You get out in the country, you go to Mac's and you want to get sushi from Mac's food store. I will take iguana any day over Mac's sushi. If you're lucky, this is what you get. You start getting some seedlings come up. Sometimes you get some really cool things. Some things pop up that are variegated and whatnot. I just brought up a tray full of wild collected things for the Arboretum here to plant out and do things with. Now, my staff is not always completely supportive. Last year I was gone during a large event that we do, and they walked around with these to take donations to vote on whether I should or should not come back. I will not tell you which one won out, but they like it when I'm gone. They get so much more work done when I'm not there. They're much more effective. But it isn't all wild collecting. It's also, we spend a lot of time at nurseries. We visit nurseries all across the U.S. We visit nurseries in Europe, in the U.K. We go to Japan. You get really excited when you see a nursery like this. This is where all the good stuff is, tucked away in these funky nurseries. New Zealand. I knew it was hard to get plants into New Zealand. I had no idea how difficult it is to get plants out of New Zealand. Holy cow, that takes an act of, almost a literal act of Congress in New Zealand to get them out. But you can do it. Seed, it's a little bit easier. There's a program called Index Semina, which is just Latin for seed list, that we participate in. We publish a list every year, and botanical gardens, botanical research institutions can order plants from us. We get plants from other places all over the world. It's really a great way to exchange plants. We also have great plant breeders at NC State. We have, I would say, the best woody plant breeding program in the country, maybe in the world. I really believe that. We've got fantastic plant breeders. Things like the Buddleia that Denny Werner's doing, Miss Ruby, Blue Chip, Ice Chip, all these things. His red buds. Y'all are getting to see first images. The protections just came through. I actually, earlier this week, called Denny up and said, can I put these pictures in? And he said I could. So this is the first talk I've done with these. So y'all are a treat. This is officially out this fall. Probably not going to be very much available until fall after this. This is Golden Falls Redbud. It's kind of the sister to Ruby Falls, if you've seen that. Very excited about this. It's with Hearts of Gold, and you can see kind of the new growth comes out, that kind of corally color, and then goes gold. This is it growing in full sun in the Sandhills of North Carolina. Looking pretty good out there. And the other one is Flamethrower, which comes out burgundy and then goes gold. This is a cool plant. I'm excited about that. So look for those in your garden center soon. Sometimes where we get plants come from out of the blue. We were at a trade show and a woman came in and said, I've got a dwarf American beech growing in my woods. And in my head I said, no, you don't. Because there's a million European beech cultivars. There are not any, basically, of American beech. And she came back the next day with a picture. She showed me this black and white picture that she had printed out on her computer. And it was hard to tell what anything was, but I was sure it was a beech that a tree had fallen on, broken off the top, and it just had never put up a leader again. Well, I'd say, okay, I'll come out and see it. Come out to an alpaca farm, which I'm here to say, alpaca wool socks are the best Christmas presents ever, and if you want to send them to me, that's okay. They're amazing. We go out in the woods, and there is this little dwarf weeping American beech. Looks like a Japanese maple. And the woman in here is the one who told me about it. It wasn't actually her property. It's the guy next to her's property. And I was so excited about it. And he said, this is right by the path I go on to get to my deer stand. And I'm going to run over this thing with my ATV one of these days. So why don't you just take it? I was like, oh, okay. And we dug it out and brought it back and tried to think of a name for it. We got a new employee, and I told her, I was like, come up with a name for it. You get to name a plant. And, I got a text about 4 days later, about 10 o'clock at night, that just said white lightning. I was like, that's it. It's a great name for that. So, unfortunately, we haven't been able to propagate the stupid thing. So we keep sending it out to different people, grafting it, and got our fingers crossed that we're going to have some luck this year. But so far, we've got one grafted plant that I sent back to the person we got it from. But what do we bring in all these plants, so what are we doing with them? We can have all the plants in the world. It's all about evaluating them. And we do a lot of different evaluations. We do annual trials out there where seed companies pay us to trial their annuals. We're part of the National Boxwood Trials, which has been pretty quiet since boxwood blight, but hopefully we'll get them going again. Some nurseries send us plants and want us to evaluate them for them. So we'll plant them out and we'll see how they do. And then other times it's just we plant plants out and we see what happens to them. This past winter we had 200 hours straight below freezing, and every gardener around the area was moaning and groaning. I'm secretly grinning about it. I love it. 2007, we had a 100-year drought. We loved it because we want to kill plants. We want to stress plants. We want to see how they perform. And if you have great growing years, we don't learn anything. 2007, we learned a lot. Viburnum, not so drought tolerant. They were devastated. But there was one species that really, it just didn't skip a beat. A southeastern species, Viburnum obovatum, Walter's viburnum. It is the ugliest plant. It is gangly and loose and just doesn't look good. But we started getting some dwarf ones. And we had one that we developed. We got a seedling off of Ms. Schiller's Delight, which is a little bit more upright, but still dwarf. We named it Ralston Hardy because in the nursery, with our nursery partners, it proved to be hardier than any of the other dwarf ones like Compactum and Ms. Schiller's Delight. Now the nurseries around Raleigh are doing this in the, I think they're going to have about 12,000 this year. This is just taken off. It's like a little Hellery holly, but it flowers really nicely. And it's native. It's got all these great things going for it. Podocarps were another one that sailed through the drought. I never thought of podocarps as being that drought tolerant, but they did not miss a beat. This was a plant during that drought planted right by our parking lot with a big electric, a water box behind it that reflects all the heat. So what do? We start collecting as many podocarps as we can, and there's some cool stuff out there like Akame, which is being sold by several different names in the U.S., but with bright red new growth. We have ones with bright gold new growth. We tried a bunch of different species, which most of them were not hardy. but a lot of great stuff out there. We've got a great upright one with these short, stubby needles that we're getting into production now. It's like a sky pencil holly. Fatsia polycarpa. This is a Taiwan species. It wasn't until I was going to Taiwan that I even realized there was another species of Fatsia besides Fatsia japonica. Anybody know why Fatsia japonica, you rarely see that in the nursery? Because it flushes once per year. And that's it, and it stops. And then you got to wait another year to flush. It takes a long time to get a saleable plant, and you can't take a lot of cuttings on it. Fatsia polycarpa, the Taiwan form, grows all through the growing season. So you get a big plant very quickly. I just brought a little cutting to Kevin, so in 2 years at your plant sale, I predict that he'll have 40 or 50 of these to sell. But it's got such a different texture. Now, it isn't quite as hardy, and it gets hit with the cold for us, but we're starting to do some crosses with Fatsia polycarpa and Fatsia japonica, hoping to get some more hardiness in there, but one that will, Fatsia japonica, that will continue to flush and maybe has some of these really serrate leaves on there. So it's all about using these genetics to improve plants for people. And there's a world of plants out there that we're just not growing at all. I saw some dendropanics in the plant sale area, I think, but there's all kinds of species out there that are hardy for us that we're not growing. So we've got about 4 or 5, 6 different species that we're evaluating right now. All kinds of great things. Euonymus. Isn't that a pretty tree? That is not what you think of when you think of euonymus. That's not your burning bush. That's not your ground covering vine. Look at that. Those seeds, those fruits, from wingtip to wingtip on a form we have called beniyako, which means red kite, are 4 inches across. Yeah, wow. I mean, that is a gorgeous plant. Never seen it in the U.S. Until it was brought back in just recently. We also evaluate our collections, things we plant out. Sometimes it takes a long time. These are from the 1956 plant collection by the U.S. National Arboretum to Japan for the Japanese crepe myrtle, Lagerstroemia faurii. These are what bring all the disease tolerance into all the crepe myrtles that you know and love. Well, one of the ones we had was very upright, and it was named by J.C. Fantasy. Still going strong at the Arboretum. It's gorgeous. One more recently, a red bud that we had grown for probably 20 years, and every year we kind of look at it and say, wow, this is the first one that comes into flower. It's the last one to finish flowering in the Arboretum. It flowers heavier than anything else we've ever seen, has great color. So we finally put a name on it, named it for Kay Yao, the basketball coach at NC State who passed away with breast cancer. So it's Kay's Early Hope because it's flowering in time for March Madness. And this has been a big hit. This is nurseries can't produce enough of it. So it's not enough to grow these plants, to distribute these plants. It's also, we've got to educate people about them. We're part of a university. That's what it's all about, getting out there and talking about them. So we do lots of talks like this. We do talks with symposia and all kinds of things like that. We've always done a good job of adult education. But there's a real issue. There aren't enough people coming into horticulture. There's too many jobs and not enough people. And there's 2 big problems. One, people have no idea what horticulture is, so they don't go into it. And if they do, their parents tell them not to do it because there's no money in it, there's no jobs in it, there's no anything. And they're wrong. So we have always really concentrated on adults, college age and above. But we started doing children's programming to provide a pipeline into the university. So we do everything from pre-K to grade school. We have summer camps. We started a middle school camp. It's a week-long camp for middle school students. And then they meet once a month on a Saturday, a science Saturday. It's all very STEM-based horticulture that they're doing. And those kids are incredible. Man, they ask you questions, and that gets hard. Much harder questions than the college students ever do. And then we've even gone into high school. We host with the department a week-long, it's called the Horticultural Science Summer Institute for Rising sophomores and juniors. We bring them in for a week. They stay in a dorm. They get the college experience. They come out to the Arboretum. We work with them. They go to Bayer Crops Bee Labs. They go to small farms. They go to nurseries, just all over the place. They go to tissue culture labs, get kind of high-tech to, really hands-on, down and dirty horticulture, and get kind of what horticulture is writ large. And it's really exciting to bring them in and do that. And of course, we do lots of adult things. I was thinking we do a lot of tours, day trips and longer trips. We got to bring a group down here to tour the campus. I think they'd really enjoy that. And then the thing that we're really known for is the distributions, getting the plants out to people. We do that a lot of different ways. We're always starting new, different distributions. There's some, we have a big gala where we have a big auction and do a lot of plants that way. Do plant sales. We used to not be able to do any plant sales. There's a federal law called the Hatch Act, which prohibits you from competing with your constituents. And as the universities stopped funding anything, they started saying, it's okay if you sell plants. It's okay if you do, raise money on your own to fund your operations. So we do some plant sales now. We do, in the course of a year, we do about $60,000 in plant sales over the course of a couple of big plant sales and then some on-site small, just self-service sales. So it's not bad for us. We also do a lot of giving plants away. Our high-level members get what we call connoisseur plants. These are some of the really cool cutting-edge stuff. We participate in that seed list, the Index Semina, so we collect seed, send it out. We still allow nurserymen to come in and take cuttings. We ask for you to check in with us before you just come and start taking cuttings, but we've had folks who are starting up nurseries new, and we'll go out with them and show them some stuff that might be really interesting for them to try, get them through those plants. We send plants out to members of the North Carolina Nursery and Landscape Association. We do a big distribution. We're having to rethink that. We used to do it at the summer show, but they canceled the summer show, so now we're having to rethink how we're doing it. Hey, Bob, there's your variegated hibiscus you were asking about. The big one, though, is our members giveaway. The Friends of the Arboretum is our members. That is coming up next Saturday. It's the first Saturday in October every year, 9 a.m. sharp. We have people who come routinely from Tennessee, Maryland, Ohio, Georgia, to come to our plant giveaway. And people get up there, start lining up about 6 o'clock in the morning. Here's a pro tip. If you want to join the Arboretum and come up and go to this, you don't need to show up that early. Roll in there about 8:30, you're fine. Being first in line doesn't help you out at all. People get out and they line up. I think Saturday morning, we will be posting our list of the plants that will be out there. And that's the list, the bulk of the plants that will be out there. Then there'll be about another, 1,000 or so that aren't on the list where we just have ones or twos of the things. So you can look at it and see if it looks good for you. And then we blow a horn and let people go. That is sped up. That's not how it is. It used to be, people stopped coming because it used to be this real free-for-all. Now it's not. We allow you to take 3 plants when we blow the whistle, and then you all have to get back behind a line. And I stand there with a megaphone, and I yell at you, and will shame you publicly if you try and take more plants or cross the painted-on line. And people leave very, very happy with the plant sale. They go home with, you can always tell the people who've been before because they always have something with wheels on it that they can lug a lot of plants. But you get people with laundry baskets with a rope on there and just all kinds of stuff. That's almost the most fun part. I did have an image I didn't put in there. So we put this list out, and people go through the list, and the stuff on the list is all at a numbered stake, so you can figure out where you want to stand to get your plants, what your game plan is going to be. And I've got this picture where it's one person has plants and numbers written on their hand, one person has this little scrap of paper that they've written it on, and one person has a spreadsheet where it has color-coded what's most important, what's less important, whether it's shade or sun, this whole thing this matrix that they've worked out gives you a good insight into the psyche of some people. I'm a scrap of paper person. I'm not right on the hand, but definitely not the spreadsheet. So, sometimes we just give plants away to people. When we lose tags and things, they're no good for us if we don't know for sure what it is. We will give it away. You don't have to read this whole thing. It basically just says what I just said. We give them away. The important thing here is that when we do that, you can never, ever, ever ask us what the plant is, because if we knew, we wouldn't have given it to you. People do not live up to that rule. We get people all the time say, I got this, it didn't have a label from the Arboretum. What is it? I don't know. So, what are we now? JC was really ahead of his time. The two of the quotes that he's most famous for is that the Arboretum is there to diversify the American landscape, which we still use because the American landscape is evolving. Now we're looking at more sustainability, like the garden that you're doing here. We're not doing vegetables, but there is a lot more interest in edibles. So we're looking at ornamental edibles. We're looking at green infrastructure, green roofs. We have UNC System's first green roof, green walls, those kinds of things as the American landscape is evolving. Rain gardens. Look at a list of plants for rain gardens, and it is a boring list, and it's usually a bad list because you don't want wetland plants. You want plants that tolerate drought and periods of inundation. So we're sticking hellebores in our rain garden. We're sticking, whatever. We put it in there and see how it does, because we want to diversify the American landscape. The other quote JC always had, and this is the one he's really known for, and it was on my title slide, is plan and plant for a better world. And I love that because you can plant all the things in the world you want, but it's really all about the planning. It's the thinking ahead about what you're doing. So that's still kind of the ethos we have, how we live. From JC's time to now, we're still one of the premier resources for plants and plant information. We've got some big things in the works in terms of plant information that I'm hoping works out. This is one that I use with the university administration a lot. I say, other than athletics, we are the primary public face of NC State. If you're not an alumnus of NC State, we are the main way that you will ever interact with NC State if you're in the Raleigh area, other than athletics, is going to be through the Arboretum. We bring in an audience that they don't get. More important for those folks than anybody else. We still are all about finding, breeding, testing, and promoting superior plants, and that's important now. And the thing that JC always did, people always think JC Ralston introduced all these plants. The fact is, he didn't introduce many plants at all. There's a handful that he introduced. What he did was he connected the right people to the right plants, and they got out into the industry. A lot of gardens just grow a plant, say people will love it, they'll want it, they'll go to their nurseries and ask for it, and then what? They'll get it? If the nurseries don't have it, you're not getting the plant. So we start at the other end trying to fill the pipeline so that and get the plants to the nurseries. And it's all about connecting the plants and people. There are things that I get in and I'll say, this is great for us, but I know somebody who's really going to be able to do something with this. Use it for breeding. It'll fit into the product line they're already producing, whatever that is, and immediately I'll send the plant out to them. I'll send my only plant to them and say, hey, when you get this propagated, send one back to me. But that's the real key, is connecting people to plants. So you just got some glamour shot here. But I think I may have a minute or two. It's always dangerous to give a talk before dinner because people may stand up and walk out on you. But I may have a minute or two. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Excellent. Everybody wants dinner. Thank you. And I hope you will come and visit us at the Arboretum. If you do, stop in and say hello. Thanks for having me.
I've got two things I want to make sure that I'll leave us with after hearing everything he's had to tell us about the Arboretum. And I got to meet JC a couple times, and I would think that JC's pretty proud wherever he's looking down from right now that the Arboretum's in Mark's hands. And so let's give him another hand. One of those times I got to meet JC was 1991 at Gilbert's Nursery when I was a propagator there. And he actually brought NC State's class to tour the nursery. And so I'm kind of pinching myself right now thinking that 27 years later, I extended an invitation to the director of the Arboretum that's now named after him, and Mark graciously accepted that invitation to come speak to us. So thank you again, Mark. And on behalf of Jason and Jay and our department, I've got another quick story to tell you. And it's something that came up in our trip that we went to last week when we were walking around the grounds at the Arboretum. A number of years ago, we were up there, and we just, on a whim, bumped into another famous plantsman, Dr. Michael Durr. And Dr. Durr was in the J.C. Ralston Arboretum when his daughter was at Duke Medical Center with cystic fibrosis. And he said, you know, I was walking around the garden because this is what gardens do. Gardens heal. So we had the privilege of running into one of the world's greatest plantsmen in the garden named after one of the other world's greatest plantsmen. And he dropped what he was doing as he was going through that garden for therapeutic purposes, and he walked our students around for 1 hour. Well, when we were on that trip last week, one of our students got a phone call that his grandmother died. And Jason Bagwell had the presence to approach that student and say, let me tell you about what gardens do. Gardens heal. You enjoy your time in the garden, you enjoy your time with your friends, enjoy this trip, and remember your loved one. So plants do a whole lot of things when they're connected with the right people. So really an honor to have Mark here tonight. I want us to think about when we go outside that we've tried to at least live up to some of the vision of J.C. Ralston. It's no coincidence that we give you plants every year. That's not our idea. That's what the goal that J.C. Ralston set, give plants to people. So you've got a handout. Everybody, please take one of those plants home we've put out there. We want to get them in your hands, get them in your garden. And we've started a new thing this year. Mark generously brought plants for our silent auction. So during dinner, throughout the dinner time, please walk around the tables. We've got some bid sheets out there. He's generously given some plants. We've brought some in from what we've produced here. Hopefully you'll take those home, and this will be something that we do as a continual thing each year. Jason said that he'll be standing up at the end of dinner, and we'll kind of tally the winning bids, and we'll put that plant in the right hands and send you home with that. So thank you again for coming tonight. Enjoy dinner. We're going to have some great food and a lot of fellowship. Thank you all for coming.